The finish line is in sight, but there are 3 very important game weeks to go in FPL, so let's get set up for game week 36. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and today we're going to help you get set up for game week 36. But first off, let's take a quick look back at my game week 35 performance, which so far hasn't looked too good. Now, obviously, I've still got 3 players left to play tonight, or 4 rather, left to play tonight, 2 Spurs and 2 Chelsea. But I wanted to get this video out nice and early so it gives you the best possible opportunity of getting all this information in and set up for game week 36. Now, 48 minus 8 at the moment is a pretty big red arrow. It is very frustrating, but a lot of the moves I made were warranted and necessary, mainly because I'm bench boosting in game week 37, and I had at least 2 players who were out for the season. Very unlucky on the wild card. Both Lascelles and Udogie have been ruled out for the remainder of the season. And in fact, one of the players that I brought in with a hit, Fabian Schär, went off at halftime for Newcastle as well. So he could be yet another issue I might have to deal with this game week. But we don't know that just yet. Looking around my team for now, though, Gordon and Isak are basically the only 2 players who did anything of note for me. I did bring in Gordon for Salah. That obviously paid off. And 10 points is pretty good return from him. A little bit disappointed not to get a goal as well, but overall cannot complain whatsoever. In the meantime, though, looking around the rest of the team, it was wholly disappointing. Haaland obviously not starting the match wasn't a big surprise, but Foden definitely was. Now, he was taken ill along with Ruben Diaz as well, but he looks like he's back in training now for future game weeks. So not an issue moving forwards, but it does mean that I did need to rely on João Pedro coming off the bench, especially when Haaland luckily did come on for the 5-point return, got the goal, and I didn't have to worry about going a second bench position deep because, of course, as you can see, I've got 2 yellow flags on my bench as well, and it looks very unlikely at this point that Gusto is going to be available for the second game in game week 35 for Chelsea. So luckily, I didn't have to rely on that, but João Pedro coming off the bench with just 2 points didn't exactly help me out too much. It does feel a little bit like a top 100k finish is slipping away from me, which would be frustrating. I think it'd be my 5th consecutive top 100k finish if I were to achieve it. That is my focus at this point. But with injuries, yellow flags, and rotation setting in, it looks like I might need to make a few moves and go on the attack in the last few game weeks to differentiate myself and try and regain around 10 points on the average to make up the difference to the top 100k. That does mean that risky moves are required. And I think if I just went with the template picks and the template captain between now and the end of the season, I'm probably not making up that difference at the moment. So moves are required. Let's start taking a look at how to set up for game week 36 now. So first up, let's take a look at captaincy for game week 36. And I actually think this week is going to be really, really interesting for captaincy choices. Now, if you're looking at maintaining or holding rank, I think there is probably one standout pick. That will be Erling Haaland. He's probably the safest or most reliable captain this week. Wolves at home is a good fixture. They do have injury problems. And even though they did a bit of a number on Haaland earlier in the season, it looks like they don't have the players to do that again this game week. So Erling Haaland does make a lot of sense. He's back, fit and firing, will very likely start the game, and it looks like a pretty good matchup for him. He's also got the best underlying attacking data in the game at 1.07. So really, if you want to just go captain sensible, Haaland is the pick. However, if you're chasing rank at this point, game week 36 could be a good opportunity to have a look around and look at other options that on any given game week could be Erling Haaland. Now, obviously, he's most likely to score the most points in my view, but in one game week, anything can happen, right? We can get a bit of variance, a bit of randomness, and I think any of these players, and some that I haven't even been able to fit on this matrix, could pop off this game week. So looking at the alternative Man City asset first, who I haven't included here, but Phil Foden or KDB could be reasonable differential captains this week ahead of Erling Haaland if you're chasing, but you still really fancy that fixture as a matchup for Man City. Now, obviously, they didn't look fantastic against Nottingham Forest, but they still got the job done. Foden was out with illness, but we expect him to start again. So if you've got Phil Foden, I have him. I'm not that worried about a start. I think he will play the game. It's just whether or not he plays centrally. If he plays centrally, I think he is a fine captaincy option. He's maybe not as explosive when Haaland is on the pitch, and I think there's data to support that hypothesis. But he's still a fantastic asset. We know that he's got a few hauls in him, so you could get lucky and pick him as captain, and it might pop off. KDB as well, very low on the goal threat, but he has looked phenomenal at creating chances recently, and he is a big game player. So you'd expect him to start the game. You'd expect him more so or more likely than Phil Foden to play centrally, and therefore he is quite likely to be in and amongst the chances in game week 36. So I'd have no problem with captaining either of those, obviously not on the matrix today, but Haaland out of the Man City assets is the obvious pick. Now, Cole Palmer at Chelsea is one player that I've really been tempted by this week. Great home fixture against West Ham, who really have not much to play for at this point. It looks like David Moyes is going to be off in the summer. So a lot of players right now will be kind of wondering what to do next. Now, they themselves haven't looked fantastic recently either. They obviously shipped 5 goals to Palace recently, a game that I actually went and saw live. They looked really leggy that day. It looked like their season was kind of over. However, they did pick themselves up pretty well against Liverpool, so maybe that's something to take into account. Chelsea on their day can be fantastic going forwards. Cole Palmer himself, I don't think we even need to talk about him. He's just been fantastic all season long. Great underlying attacking data, 30 attacking returns, and over 200 points in 24 starts now. Absolutely madness. Now, Cole Palmer isn't the only differential captain at Chelsea that I'd probably be looking at. Jackson also has fantastic data as well. In fact, I think it's a shade better than Cole Palmer's. Now, the problem with him is he can't hit a barn door sometimes, and he can be very frustrating. So Cole Palmer would be the obvious pick there. But if you wanted to go really differential, Jackson does have good data, albeit he can be a little bit frustrating and he's not on penalties. So Cole Palmer, despite high ownership, will be differential as a captain, so I would be tempted. Now, moving down, I've got Newcastle assets on here as well. So Isak away at Burnley. Great matchup, Burnley, although it is worth noting that Newcastle away from home haven't been anywhere near as prolific as they have at home. I think FPL Fran, fantastic account to follow, by the way. If you check him out on Twitter, he did a comparison between home fixtures and away fixtures for all 20 Premier League clubs. And I believe Newcastle had the biggest drop-off from home data to away data. That means that away from home, they're nowhere near as potent. So an away fixture, even though it is against Burnley, might be enough to put you off. Now, one thing I would like to note there is that their away data is going to be slightly worse because they haven't played Burnley yet. Burnley are a really bad defence. And if you account for that fixture in the away data, their data is probably going to improve a little bit. So it's probably not as bad as it looks on paper right now. And fundamentally, Newcastle have a lot to fight for right now. So do Burnley, by the way. But I predict a pretty open game. And Isak, and Gordon to a lesser extent, but specifically Isak, has been phenomenal all season long. He's vying for the Golden Boot with 19 goals already. He's only 2 off top spot, which is Haaland. And he has just been unstoppable recently. So I'd have no problem with captaining Isak, or maybe to a lesser extent Gordon, although it is worth noting that Gordon specifically has struggled away from home more than even his Newcastle teammates. I think he's only got 2 attacking returns all season away from home. Almost all of them have come at home. Not enough for me to want to bench him, but captaincy, I'm not quite so sure. Moving down the list, one player that everyone has sold is Mo Salah. Now, Mo Salah obviously has been very frustrating this season, or specifically the last few game weeks, actually, not really so far this season. Has still got really good underlying attacking data at 1 XGI per 90. He's on penalties, and even though they've had a little bit of a spat on the sidelines, I'd be very surprised if he didn't start against Tottenham. And that matchup down the right wing for Liverpool is going to be very positive for Liverpool against Spurs. Now, Spurs really struggled against Arsenal, and Saka down that right wing for Arsenal did really well against Ben Davies. Now, Ben Davies did get isolated a lot, And it could be either a blessing or a curse that even he is now out for the season injured as well as Udogie. So they're going to have to start their third choice left back, which I would assume is going to be Emerson Royale. Now, again, he hasn't played for quite a while now, and especially against Mo Salah and against Liverpool, you'd expect that to be a little bit of a battle. So I think Mo Salah's going to have a good game week. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he hauled against Spurs, despite the fact he has been frustrating recently. And considering everyone else has sold him, if you've held on to him, I'd be really tempted to throw the armband on him as a massive differential. And as we know, he's got huge, huge upside on any given game. So Mo Salah, I do really like it. Now, again, the final team that I want to talk about is Arsenal. Bournemouth have actually been really good this season, so I don't think it's as good a matchup as some of the other games here. But Arsenal have been phenomenal too. And Saka, particularly, has great underlying attacking data, 27 attacking returns, which is a record for him, and is the top point scorer out of all of these options on the spreadsheet. Now, I think if I was really choosing right now, Saka probably wouldn't be my bust team captain, even if I did have him in my team. But he is definitely a differential you could consider if you've held on to him. Equally, if you've held on to Kai Havertz as a differential, he could be a good matchup against Bournemouth as well. It is worth noting, though, that of the fixture matchups on this spreadsheet, I don't think Bournemouth is necessarily the best one. They've been good this season. They have just hit their record points total. Maybe that means they take their foot off the gas a little bit, but overall, I think there are better fixtures out there. One final mention that I haven't put on this spreadsheet because fundamentally there just isn't space. But if you've held on to Ollie Watkins against Brighton, even though it's away from home, Brighton have looked all at sea recently, no pun intended. But I think the matchup is very, very good for Aston Villa this week. They've lost Van Heck in the defence for Brighton as well. And Ollie Watkins, a bit like Isak, a bit like Haaland, will be going for the Golden Boot this season. And of course, is vying for a spot at the Euros with England. So he'll want to impress in the last 3 game weeks. I'm really, really keen on Ollie Watkins, as I'm sure I'll explain a little bit more later on. And I think he could do really well against Brighton. I wouldn't be completely disregarding him as a differential captaincy option either. So in summary, I think Haaland is the obvious captain. He's definitely captain sensible. But any of the alternatives I've just spoken about, if you're chasing rank, could be differential captaincy options that could make all the difference this week. You've only got 3 captaincy choices left between now and the end of the season. And maybe it's time, if you're chasing rank, if you're 20, 30 points behind in the mini league, to take a couple of gambles, take a calculated risk on captaincy this week when there are a few good options around, and just hope that Haaland has a bit of an off day. Now, that's an option that I'm considering at the moment. I'm not locking in on it because I'm maybe 10 points behind where I want to be, so maybe I don't need to take a huge gamble. I think there are really good captaincy options around, and I definitely wouldn't be just putting it on Haaland and forgetting the decision altogether. Now, on to the first of my transfer segments today, and unfortunately, I've been a bit plagued with injuries since wildcarding in game week 30. I've described a few of the issues I've had already, but another one that looks like it's going to be a season-ending issue is Van Heck. Now, Van Heck apparently has a bit of a hamstring injury at the moment. Now, usually those take a few weeks to recover, obviously depending on how severe it is. So it is worth waiting if you don't need to make a transfer early and you've got Van Heck in your side, because who knows, we might get good news and he might start matches between now and the end of the season, most importantly in game week 37 when they have a double game week. However, even if he was fit and firing by game week 37, I'm not that sure I want him anyway at this point. Brighton have been pretty shaky at the back for quite a while now, and realistically I think there's better upside and better defensive returns out there from other alternatives. So 2 players I'm looking at are Ben White at Arsenal. Now, obviously, no double game week in 37, but they are the best defence in the league by quite some margin, and 2 good home games in 36 and 38. Makes me wonder whether going double Arsenal defence, I've already got Gabriel, could be a good option between now and the end of the season. And honestly, I wouldn't even be that massively surprised if they kept a clean sheet away from home in 37 as well. And on a bench boost, even if it's a single game week player, if he can get a clean sheet out of it, then I'm pretty happy overall. I don't think it's a massive problem to have double Arsenal defence. Now, Ben White also has attacking upside as well, so it's not as simple as if they don't keep a clean sheet, it's going to be a failure. He does still have upside, so I really like him as a pick. I definitely wouldn't be put off double Arsenal defence, even if you're bench boosting in 37. However, another player I'm looking at is Gvardiol. Now, the reason that he probably takes priority over double Arsenal defence is because at the moment, I don't have any City coverage in the back, and I'm looking at KDB, but realistically, it's going to stretch my squad budget just a little bit too much. So having a triple up in attack is going to be quite difficult for me. Gvardiol has been starting a lot of games recently, has decent attacking upside, a shade better than Ben White's, and on the eye as well, he's been getting into pretty decent attacking positions recently. I'm not expecting a goal every other game from him, but the chances are there for another attacking return. So for pretty decent fixtures, Wolves at home and West Ham at home, either side of the double game week, and then Fulham and Spurs away in the double game week itself. I reckon if I was a betting man, which I'm really not, he starts maybe 3 of the 4 games, maybe gets a rest in one of them. We're just kind of hoping that that's not in the double game week. Now, I think overall there is also still a chance that he starts all 4 of them because they've got nothing else to play for between now and game week 38. And then they've got the FA Cup final after game week 38. So barring injuries or rests required, there's no real reason for Pep to rotate between now and the end of the season. Gvardiol has been phenomenal recently, so I'd be quite surprised if he even did get a rest. The only reason that I'm predicting 3 starts out of 4 is because Pep can be very, very frustrating as an FPL manager to try and predict. If I was picking the Man City 11, he'd be in the starting 11 every single time between now and game week 38. But the risk is there. So I think overall, it's weighing up the fact that they've got the extra game over Arsenal and the fact that I think objectively the fixtures are as good, if not maybe slightly better, playing the 4 over the 3 than the Arsenal fixtures as well. And I've already got an Arsenal defender anyway. So do I want to go for the double up? So out of the 2, I think I'm slightly favouring Gvardiol, but I could completely understand anyone looking at an Arsenal double up in defence, even if they are on a bench boost. Another move that I am considering, although this would be for a hit, is making a Man United switcheroo from Garnacho up to Bruno Fernandes. Now, I've talked about Fernandes quite a lot recently on a lot of my videos, and it's clear to see that I am pretty keen on him as an FPL asset. He has been phenomenal for about 10 game weeks now. He's been really, really good. Great underlying attacking data at 0.60 XGI per 90. And even though he blanked in game week 35, he looked absolutely ridiculous. He was so unlucky not to get an attacking return. And watching the game back, I don't really know how he avoided it. Now, obviously, Man United do have that double game week in game week 37. One of those fixtures is Arsenal at home, so that's going to be very difficult. But outside of that, Crystal Palace away, Newcastle at home, and Brighton away, all decent enough fixtures for attacking returns. And Bruno, on penalties, great underlying data, I think is just a phenomenal option for now to the end of the season. The question is it worth a hit to upgrade Garnacho to Bruno? And I have been umming and ahhing about this for a couple of game weeks now because I almost made the move last week for a hit as well. Now, I'm glad I didn't because it wouldn't have paid off last week, but I have found myself in the position where Garnacho just has been a bit frustrating recently. The data isn't as good, although it is worth noting that he's still pretty nailed for minutes, and he has been quite unfortunate not to get attacking returns in the last couple of weeks as well. His data's not exactly bad. It's 0.41 XGI per 90. It's just not quite as explosive as Bruno's. Although it is worth noting that half of Bruno's attacking data is from chances created and assist threat, whereas a lot more of Garnacho's data is from XG, which is obviously the goals per 90. Bruno is a fantastic option, but he is mainly creating chances for the likes of Garnacho. So if Garnacho was to finish a couple of those chances, it doesn't just benefit Bruno, it also obviously benefits Garnacho. So I am wondering whether, as a bit of a differential, I hold on to Garnacho and hope that if Bruno's creating the chances, Garnacho can at least finish 1 or 2 of them and therefore come away with a couple of goals between now and the end of the season. I'm a bit worried that overall, Bruno is just fundamentally the better pick. He's going to be a lot higher ownership than Garnacho between now and the end of the season. But if I'm chasing, is the best idea for me to take a hit to buy a player that is going to be pretty template when I've already got a fairly differential player with decent attacking upside in my side anyway, and I don't need to take a hit to have him? So is it worth it for 4 points to get rid of that player for someone that probably isn't going to gain me a lot on the crowd if he does pop off? I'm umming and ahhing about it. Let me know in the comments below whether you would switch Garnacho to Bruno for a hit. At the moment, there's another hit that I'm thinking about, which I think tempts me a little bit more, although you're probably going to call me crazy. So the final transfer I'm looking at making is, on paper, a pretty crazy one, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense if you just look at the stats and the fixtures remaining. Now, João Pedro has better underlying data, 0.67, than Ollie Watkins at 0.60, and has an extra fixture in game week 37 as well. Meanwhile, Villa play Liverpool away from home. However, if you take into context the season that they've both had, Ollie Watkins has had the season of his life. He's got 36 attacking returns, including 19 goals. He's vying for a spot in the Euros with England, so he's going to be going completely foot down to the finish line, trying to get as many goals as possible. And Villa are also chasing a Champions League spot for next season. So Ollie Watkins is going to be pivotal in that, and I would imagine he's going to stop at nothing to make sure that Villa get over the line and get 4th spot. So motivation is a big factor here. Even though they've got a game less, you look at those fixtures on paper, Brighton away from home, like I mentioned, have looked all at sea recently, and I think defensively, I wouldn't be worried at all about playing my attackers against them. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, he could be a bit of a differential captaincy shout against Brighton this week. Liverpool away from home, again, red on the fixture ticker, not a double game week. On paper, doesn't make a lot of sense. But Liverpool have been leaking goals recently. Villa have a ton to play for, and Ollie Watkins has been unstoppable. So do I really mind playing him on a bench boost? Not really. And even though it's not a double game week, looking at the double game week that João Pedro has of Newcastle away from home and Chelsea at home, okay, yes, there are goals there for him, but they've been very patchy. I think their goal of the month competition last month was actually given as an own goal because that's the only goal they got all month long in April. So they've not exactly been prolific in front of goal. João Pedro is definitely a part of that. And despite the fact that he's got really good underlying attacking data, is it time to cut my losses there and just say, you know what, I'm going to back the guy who's been phenomenal all season, is clearly seeing the goals 10 times bigger than they actually are, and finding the back of the net with regularity. Now, this is a move that would be a massive risk. Removing a player with 4 fixtures who's barely nailed into that 11 for a player with 3 fixtures and arguably worse fixtures doesn't make a lot of sense. But I'm chasing rank. João Pedro, whilst being a differential, is not a player that I've got any confidence in whatsoever between now and the end of the season. So I am tempted, even though it's for a hit, to bring in a player that has been absolutely phenomenal all season and has found himself, weirdly, as a massive differential now in all of our teams between now and the end of the season. No one else is going to be buying him. He's been brilliant, and even recently, since people have sold him, including myself, he's continued to bag returns. I really like it, genuinely. So, I don't know. Is it worth a hit? Probably objectively not. But am I going to take that risk anyway, just because I am chasing rank and because I need to differentiate myself a little bit? I could do. So let me know in the comments below just how crazy you think this move is, because I'm sure you agree and you think it is crazy. But despite that, I'm still pretty tempted to do it. So now taking a look at my team selection for game week 36. In goal, Petrovic at home to West Ham, I think is fine. Because Gusto especially looks like he might well be injured, I don't think I'd be too tempted to double up. So if Gusto came in, because I knew he wasn't injured, then maybe Onana could be a shout away at Crystal Palace. Although it is worth noting that Palace have looked much, much better in front of goal recently, so perhaps not the best fixture. In the end, I'm back in the home fixture there, so I think West Ham at home is a decent opportunity for Petrovic. Moving into defence, and this is where the issues lie at the moment. Now, obviously, I've loaded in the Gvardiol transfer, put him in my starting 11 at home to Wolves, and then that matches up alongside Bournemouth at home for Gabriel. Easy starting spot for him. And then Shah away at Burnley. Now, obviously, he's yellow flagged. We don't know the extent of his injury just yet. So hopefully, because he is fairly consistent and he usually tends to recover pretty quickly, it's going to be nothing and he starts against Burnley. Although it is worth noting he hasn't been pictured in any training photos as it stands. So he could well still be a pretty big doubt for game week 36. If that is a problem, I still think I'm not going to make a transfer on him this week and hope that he's fit to play in game week 37 when, of course, they double. Now, if he was injured, then Gusto is the first one that would come in. But after that, Porro away at Liverpool, not particularly happy with it, but I don't think it's worth a hit to get rid of Shah or Gusto just to give myself a slightly better sub option than Porro. Porro obviously has good attacking upside, and even though clean sheet is extremely unlikely, I still think there's an opportunity for an attacking return against Liverpool. So I wouldn't absolutely hate it if he had to start. Moving into midfield, that is a pretty strong 5 at the moment. I'm pretty happy. In fact, I'm very happy with 4 of those 5. Burnley away for Gordon. Palmer at home to West Ham is a good captaincy option. I've put the vice captaincy on him for now, but he could be upgraded. Son away at Liverpool and Foden at home to Wolves. All very, very fine to play for this week. In fact, I'd say all 4 of them are pretty, it's not optimal, not necessarily essential, but pretty important for both this game week and game week 37 as well. The challenge comes in with Garnacho in that 5th spot. Now, Crystal Palace away isn't the worst game in the world, but it's also not the best. And as I mentioned, objectively, I prefer Bruno in that spot to Garnacho. The other alternative choice that I could make is making the Ollie Watkins switch for João Pedro, who's currently nestled first on my bench. And then what I could do is bring Ollie Watkins on for Garnacho, leave Garnacho in my 15, but put him as my first sub instead. So really, I've got 2 decisions to make. One, do I want to take a hit to remove Garnacho for Bruno and just start Bruno? Or do I want to keep Garnacho in my side ahead of game week 37, but bench him this week for Ollie Watkins for a hit? Now, those are both, on the surface, pretty risky ideas for a hit. I'm not sure that Garnacho is a bad enough asset that that a hit is required to get rid of him this week or indeed for next week. But overall, I think chasing the upside with Ollie Watkins or with Bruno Fernandes could be worth the risk. I think I'm more likely to make the Watkins transfer at this point. As I mentioned, Bruno's becoming quite template. I'm chasing rank a little bit at this point, so I need to take some calculated gambles to make this possible for a top 100k finish. So I am tempted to make the João Pedro to Ollie Watkins move, bench Garnacho, put him first sub, and then overall I'm pretty happy with the 15 and with my starting 11. The bust team captain is on Haaland as it stands. I mentioned quite a few alternatives in my 11 earlier on in this video, but Haaland is captain sensible. I need to make a decision how much I want to gamble this week, especially if I am taking the -4 to bring in Ollie Watkins. Overall, though, I don't think it's a terrible 11. There are issues there. Obviously, injuries occurring as well, and it could mean that I have to take a hit next week. But kicking that can down the road for Shah and Gusto, I think, is sensible play at the moment because there is every chance that they're available for game week 37 if they're not available for game week 36. So taking a hit to remove either of those players right now probably doesn't feel too logical, especially when I can probably get out a pretty strong starting 11 without having to do so. As always, do let me know in the comments below if you've got any of your own deadline dilemmas, and I'll try and get back to you before the deadline itself occurs. Good luck in game week 36. If you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be incredibly appreciated. I'm hoping just to get to 1,300 subscribers before the end of the season now, just a mini target I've set myself. Only a few to go, so if you could help me out, that would be greatly appreciated. In the meantime, though, good luck in game week 36, and I'll see you on the other side as we start preparing for the big double game week in 37.